Wearing a hijab hasn't always been compulsory in Iran. Mohammad Reza Shah was the last Shah of the imperial state of Iran. Inspired by Turkish leader Mustafa Kemal Ataturk, Reza Shah wanted to modernize Iran through his White Revolution. One of his envisioned aspects for modernization was what Iranian women wore. On 8th of January 1936, he issued the Unveiling Order. This made it so all forms of Islamic veils in public could not be worn. This revolution did attempt to support women in integrating and engaging with the public political sphere. This did result with women in Iran being granted the right to vote in 1963. Between 1941 and 1979, there were no laws instructing women what to wear in Iran. Many women still wore headscarves to rebel against the previous unveiling law, or because what they wore was restricted by patriarchal values implemented by their male family members. But the 1979 Islamic Revolution changed that. The revolution culminated in the overthrowing of the Pahlavi dynasty, the last Iranian royal dynasty. Through a national referendum, Iranian people voted to become an Islamic theocratic republic governed by an authoritarian regime. The new Iranian supreme leader, Ayatollah Khomeini, said women should observe Islamic dress codes. That led to tens of thousands of women in Iran protesting on the streets of Tehran. They chanted, "We didn't have a revolution to go backwards." These protests started on March 8, 1979, International Women's Day, and continued on for 6 days straight. To settle the protests, the government reported that Khomeini's remarks were but only a recommendation. These recommendations, however, became law in 1983. Under Article 638 of the Iranian Penal Code of the Islamic Consultative Assembly, it states that women who appear in public without a proper hijab should be imprisoned from 10 days to 2 months or pay a fine of 50,000 to 500,000 rial, or approximately 23,000 New Zealand dollars to 230,000 New Zealand dollars. Today, this law is still being enforced by the morality police, formerly known as Gast-e-Irshad, part of the National Police Force. The morality police are those who ensure compliance with Iran's Islamic values, which includes dress code. The so-called morality police have been infamous in the case of Mahsa Amini. The narrative the Iranian authorities have created is that Mahsa Amini died from sudden heart failure. However, her death is intertwined with a much darker story. On September 13, 2022, instead of visiting her relative in Tehran as she intended to, she was arrested by morality police at the entry of Shahid Haghani Expressway for wearing her hijab too loosely, violating the country's law on the proper mandatory wear of the hijab. She was soon taken to Vozara Detention Center, where she received a re-education on hijab rules. There she supposedly collapsed of a heart attack and was taken to Kasra Hospital in Tehran, where she passed away on September 16th. The heart attack was a cover-up story for her real cause of death. Reports vary, but the majority conclude with Amini being beaten by the so-called morality police. These include being banged against a vehicle and having her head beaten with a baton. This resulted with her collapsing into a coma and being rushed to hospital, where she passed away from multiple organ failure caused by cerebral hypoxia. Her murder has triggered protests, not just in Iran, but across the globe. Approximately there are a total of 90,000 protesters, as well as an estimate of approximately 320 deaths and at least 1,160 non-fatal injuries from the protests. 16-year-old Nika Shakarami is one of those who was murdered while protesting. September 20th, along with many other young people, mostly women, Nika chanted, "Death to the dictator," burned her headscarf, and threw rocks towards riot police in protest. Later in the evening, from 7 to 8 p.m., the riot police's actions intensified. They started using tear gas, pellet shots, grabbed protesters, and beat women with batons. Nika had messaged a friend informing them that she was being chased by security forces. That night, Nika went missing. She was discovered 10 days later, but no longer alive. What happened to Nika varies by source, but many claim that after being captured, she was raped by Ibrahim Raizi's security police, tortured, murdered, and her organs sold. An autopsy revealed multiple fractures in her pelvis, head, upper and lower limbs, hands, feet, and hip. 22-year-old protester Hadith Najafi is another protester that was ruthlessly murdered by security forces. She was shot in the head and neck with live ammunition and birdshot fired from a shotgun. Authorities kept her body for 2 days while they asked her father to say that Najafi died from a heart attack. Najafi's final video message she had sent to her friends said, "I hope in a few years when I look back I will be happy that everything has changed for the better." These people are protesting for gender equality and freedom. Enforcement of oppressing laws led to the death of Mahsa Amini, and from that brought upon the protests we are seeing now. The laws regarding the mandatory wearing of the hijab is a result of misogynistic interpretation of certain aspects of Islam. Legal law and religion both act as social regulators. Law is meant to be a beneficial form of justified protection with the intention of being fair and ethical. It is mandatory, thus, penalties exist to those who break it. Religion is a belief system with opinionated ethics that exists usually for social control without the intention of being fair. Religion is, or should be, voluntary. Both have the potential to be corrupt. But what makes religion more prone to corruption is that logical reasoning is not necessary. The formation and adaptations of religion relies on the will of a fictional higher being. But a fictional being cannot have will, as they do not exist. One idea is that the customs, taboos, and beliefs that make up religion were created by our ancestors to encourage cooperation and tolerance as humans transitioned from small hunter-gatherer tribes into large agrarian cultures. Over time, the intentions associated with the development and adjustment of religion grew from unity to more unfair, biased intentions. These unfair and biased intentions can be reflected through the misogynistic aspect of many religions. Misogyny is not logical, neither is it fair, and it is biased in favor of men. Theocracy is a form of government in which the political power is ruled by a divine being or religious texts. It restricts individual interpretation of religion. Instead, you must conform to the interpretation of the religion the government practices, whether it be harmful or not. In Iran, the government has interpreted parts of the Quran, Islam's holy book, and the Hadiths, sayings of the Prophet Muhammad, to justify that women must wear hijab. Others have interpreted it as having to dress modestly. But through the theocratic government, individual perspectives of religion are not accepted. If they say that all women in the country, whether they are Muslim or not, then all must abide, because they have made their interpretation of Islam the law. The gender inequality in Iran has made it so women are the target to abuse and silence. Their oppression has led to the passing of laws that take away their rights and individuality. The enforcement of those laws led to Mahsa Amini's death. Her death has led to the international outcry for change and justice. Rather than watching as history unfolds in front of us, we can be part of that movement to change. You can support advocates and organizations who are supporting women in Iran and help spread their message by following their social media accounts. Some accounts we suggest supporting include Mahsa Amini, who is an Iranian journalist and activist, Abdurrahman Boromand Center for Human Rights in Iran, a non-profit organization, and Human Rights Watch, a non-profit organization on Instagram and Twitter. Other forms of support include participating in protests and donating to human rights organizations that support the rights of Iranian women, Kurds, and other minorities the regime has oppressed. Some organizations you can donate to or offer your support is IKWRO, Women's Rights Organization, Center for Human Rights in Iran, and Amnesty International. Gender inequality isn't fair. It should not dictate life and death. Strive for equality. Do not be part of the problem, be part of the solution.